Okay, my friends, today my target is I can create texture with tempera paint by experimenting with different types of painting tools. So here we are going to look at some different types of birch bark. We're going to notice that there is more white than there is black or gray. Okay, so we are going to look at the different types of tools that we are going to use today. We are going to use just a regular big paintbrush. We are going to use a scrap of cardboard, and we are going to use a popsicle stick. So you are going to get quite a bit of white paint. It's going to seem like a lot of white paint, and you're going to get a smaller amount of black paint. So I'm going to use my white paint first. I'm painting my white paint onto my paper, and then I am going to use little bits of black. So I'm painting wet onto wet because I have wet paint on my paper, and I have wet paint on my brush. So I am just painting some texture. I'm adding small amounts of black, not a lot of black. You don't want this to be like a dark gray. I certainly don't want to have areas of my paper that are like all black or really, really dark. If we think back to those pictures that we saw of the birch bark, they're pretty light. So another technique that we can use today is I can paint some white paint onto my paper. I'm still painting wet on wet. And then I can use my little piece of cardboard, kind of like a stamp, where I just kind of stamp it on the paper, or I can kind of slide it or swipe it through that white wet paint. I think this is the technique that I kind of like the most and what I think looks the most like real birch bark to me. There we go. So another technique I can use, again, starts with me painting some white paint onto my paper first. And then I'm going to kind of paint a layer of gray on top. So I'm adding just little bits of black and spreading them out so it's not too black. And then I'm going to use my popsicle stick, and I'm just going to kind of scratch in because I have 2 layers of paint. I'm removing that top layer of paint and leaving just the white layer that's on the bottom. And because there's that white paint there, the black hasn't like soaked into the paper, so you really get like a white again when you scratch away. So another way that I can use my popsicle stick is I can kind of use it almost like it's a paintbrush. I have my white paint, or I can do this on top of another texture, which is what I'm doing here, is I am taking just little bits of black paint and kind of scraping them onto my paper with the popsicle stick. So I am creating an interesting looking texture here. I think this one also looks quite a bit to me like real birch bark, because real birch bark has those areas where it's really super dark and then areas where it's kind of mostly white. Okay, so we're going to look at just a couple examples of some student artwork here. I'll start with 2 that meet the target, 1 that almost meets the target, and then 1 that doesn't quite meet the target. So these first ones here meet the target, really nice textures all over their paper. This friend needed to make their texture go all over their paper, not leave a bunch of white space. And this friend didn't really make a texture, they sort of just made gray all over their paper. So we really want to focus on thinking about what birch bark looks like when we're making our textures. Okay, my friends, have a great time painting today.